Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Duff, a manager on the policy team at Ceres, and welcome to our panel, Moving Beyond Business as Usual to Address Racial Injustices. I want to thank you each for joining today, and of course, to the support of the speakers that you're going to hear from in just a minute, and to our sponsors of the conference. So I think we've all seen how the events of 2020, from the murder of George Floyd to the uneven and disproportionate impacts of COVID-19 on Black and Brown communities, have really laid bare the enduring and deep inequities that are embedded into our social, our economic, and also our political systems and structures. And we also saw how really these tragic events led to an outpouring of anti-racist activism and a flurry and cascade of corporate engagement on a scale that we really have not seen before. And a recent report came out from McKinsey that found as many as about 1/3 of Fortune 1000 stood up and made a public statement about racial equity. And then of those companies, 93% followed up with some sort of internal or external commitment. And 57 publicly announced the amount that they would be driving and investing in these types of initiatives. In total, that's about $66 billion that have been committed. And through these commitments and these statements, we've really witnessed a shift in the roles and the responsibilities that businesses are taking on when it comes to driving social progress and change. And I think activists and companies all agree that what's been done to date when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion within HR, it just has not been enough. And there is just so much more to be doing on these types of issues. And we're continuing to see these discussions unfold. So today, Ceres has brought together 4 representatives from companies across our networks to really share their perspective when it comes to how they've really captured this moment and this growing movement to refocus their approach and really redefine how they're thinking about equity and inclusion to make sure that they're driving progress towards racial justice and making meaningful impact. So I am really pleased and honored to be welcoming our speakers for the panel today. First, we have Juliana Batista, Senior Director of Diversity and Inclusion at General Mills. We have Danny Best, Director in Global Diversity and Inclusion at Dell Technologies. We have Chris Miller, Head of Global Activism at Ben & Jerry's, and Jasmine Thomas, Director of U.S. Business Partnerships, Community Investing, and Development with Citi. And with that, I'll let you all take it away.
All right. Well, thank you, Emily, and hello to my fellow panelists. It's great to be with you today. You know, we're in such a unique moment in time where we've seen clear evidence of the impact associated with racial injustice. You know, some might say that, you know, in 2020, we witnessed 2 pandemics. You know, one, of course, is, you know, COVID-19 and the disproportionate impact it's had on Black and Hispanic and underrepresented and underserved communities. And of course, the other is systemic racism and the killing of George Floyd in the U.S. and J.O. Freitas in Brazil. It's really sparked significant social unrest as we saw egregious inequities in our workplace and in societies. And we saw these inequities clearly across multiple dimensions, the dimensions of healthcare, of employment, of education, access to technology, and overall socioeconomic opportunities. So clearly, these moments have captured, the conversation in the public, and it's been a real inflection point for the community. And it's become a catalyst for organizations like ours to reevaluate and expand our work in diversity, equity, and inclusion. For us at Dell Technologies, it was an opportunity to drive immediate progress. Like many of us, we have goals associated with achieving positive, workforce outcomes by 2030. But, we're really looking to figure out what is it that we can do now? What is it that we can do now and in the next, 2 to 3 years to really accelerate progress around this issue of racial inequality? So, Juliana, I know that General Mills calls Minneapolis home and an epicenter of social unrest, given the killing of George Floyd's last year. I'm wondering, how has this impacted General Mills and your corporate ecosystem and your definition of what was required for General Mills in your community?
Yeah, thanks, Danny. As you can imagine, the murder of George Floyd and the resulting social unrest in our hometown of Minneapolis was absolutely heartbreaking to watch. And it was definitely an inflection point for the business community here. General Mills is a 150-year-old company that has always tried to do the right thing. 31 years ago, we started hosting an MLK breakfast to celebrate the legacy of Dr. King. And we have raised over $6 million to help Black students go to college. 25 years ago, we founded our Black Champions Network to support our Black employees with recruitment, development, retention, and success to make sure that they had a safe place at General Mills. We also have other affinity networks to support our Asians, Hispanics, veterans, LGBTQ+, our disabled populations, as well as our women's network. So while we have done a lot, we know that that's not enough. The events of 2020 really highlighted for us and reminded us that we live in a city, we're headquarters in a city where we have one of the biggest racial disparities in the country. So we have decided moving forward to focus on 3 areas. The first one is equitable food access. So we're directing our philanthropy efforts and working with food banks across the country to make sure that families of color have access to affordable and nutritious food. We're also supporting equity in education. So through our Box Stops for Education program, we're now, that has a legacy of nearly $1 billion donated to a school over the years. We're now redirecting the focus on giving kids of color greater equity in education so they can fulfill their full potential. And least but not last, we're also committed to equity and representation. So as you said, everybody has established some goals. And for us at General Mills, we have decided that we're going to double the representation of Black managers, and we're increasing overall minority representation to 25%. We're also committing to double our spend with minority-owned suppliers. So with those actions, we chose to support the Black communities, but also all communities of colors. And we hope that we can continue to build on the strong legacy that we have had over the years and have greater impact in the society. Jasmine, I know that Citi has a similar strategy. Can you share with us a little bit more about what you guys are doing?
Absolutely. Juliana, you're right. You've touched on an important point about the importance of leading with an institution's strengths to deliver unique value and impact. At Citi, we lead with our core business and economic research capabilities as a financial institution to clarify our mindset, design and embed investment initiatives with key stakeholder input, and commit to act with intention, authenticity, and accountability. So taking a closer look at data and research, we found racial inequity has an economic cost, and the disparities are profound, not just for the Black community, but for everyone. Citi's GPS report recently released showed that if 4 key racial gaps for Blacks, these are systems that exist today, wages and employment, education, housing, and capital investment were closed just 20 years ago. That's 2000. $16 trillion could have been added to the US economy. And if the gaps are closed today in 2021, $5 trillion can be added to the US GDP over the next 5 years. So that shifts the narrative from being a zero-sum conversation with respect to wealth to that of an economic case and an opportunity for us to invest in communities for the benefit of all. As a global financial institution, we bring unique capabilities to address systemic racism in our economy by closing the racial wealth gap and addressing economic mobility. To get started, we launched Action for Racial Equity, a corporate-wide more than $1 billion in strategic business-led initiatives, which includes at least $100 million for Black and minority banks for their growth and their revenue-generating opportunities and deals, $200 million for Black and emerging fund managers who are working on real estate development opportunities in communities, $350 million at least for Black-owned vendors and suppliers who work with Citi, and another $50 million in equity investments for Black founders. This is just a handful of commitments, and there's more in the pipeline and announcements to come. But on top of this, I'm really excited about the fact that in the last 4 months alone, we've issued more than $5 billion of bonds with Black broker-dealers as co-lead managers or exclusively in a syndicate. So no other bank or institution is leading in this way, but we're counting on others to join us and to complement our commitments, knowing that one institution cannot do it alone. We know that systemic racism doesn't just stop and start when somebody works in the financial institutions or works with institutions like banks. But it seems like Ben & Jerry's, another corporation, is thinking the same way. Is that right, Chris?
That's right. Thanks, Jasmine. I appreciate that. I think what we've tried to do at Ben & Jerry's is, in addition to focusing, as we all are, on issues of equity and diversity inside our workplace, we've really done what we've done for almost 43 years, and that's to harness the connection and relationship that we have with our customers, what we call fans at Ben & Jerry's, to be advocates for confronting the systems and structures that perpetuate systemic racism within society. And I think not just Ben & Jerry's, but I actually believe all of us as corporations and brands have a unique set of tools that we can use to bring to bear on solving issues that confront our society. You know, and I don't want to overstate this, but I think the truth is that the kinds of tools and techniques that we need to sell people on the concept that the criminal justice system in the United States is broken, it disproportionately impacts communities of color, and that we need to deconstruct it and rebuild it in a way that protects public health and safety in our communities, are the same sets of tools and techniques that, frankly, we use to sell tubs of chocolate chip cookie dough. And I am privileged to work with an incredibly skilled team that is world-class in selling ideas. And so we use this unique set of tools that we have as a for-profit ice cream company to engage our fans and help them contextualize the issues that our society is wrestling with, and often look to find ways to help them take action on these issues. And we don't spend a lot of time thinking about sort of, well, what permission does an ice cream company have to talk about issues of criminal justice? We sort of let our values and our beliefs sort of guide our work. And that's an important part of, I think, the kind of magic at Ben & Jerry's. As part of this kind of larger work that we've been doing over the last few years on issues of racial justice, we released a statement in the wake of the lynching of George Floyd. And it was remarkably the biggest thing we had ever done. It, by an order of magnitude, dwarfed flavor launches and the kinds of things we typically do. And if I'm honest, I think it speaks less about Ben & Jerry's and what we may or may not have said. I think what it did speak to is the shifting expectations that citizens have and frankly consumers have around the role that corporations play vis-a-vis these issues that our society is working with, and what does it mean to be a corporate citizen in 2021 and beyond. So I think that's something that's useful for all of us as companies and brands to think about. It's also true that it's important to listen and to understand from the communities that are sort of impacted on the front lines of these issues before we act, and ensure that those are the voices that are guiding you. So maybe with that, Danny, I think it's kind of your turn to jump in here. I'd love to hear what you're thinking about the discussion.
Yeah, well, first of all, Chris, I would say I am a huge fan of Ben & Jerry's, and all the points that you made are the reason I'm a big fan. And when I have a selection and I can choose a company, I choose a company that has the kind of values that Ben & Jerry espouses, and it's important for companies to be purpose-driven and address those pressing societal issues that we're facing today. One of the things I think about, and I know it's table stakes, but it's really, for us, it's about setting internal targets. And as I mentioned earlier, and many of you also reiterated, many of our companies have targets. We have a D&I plan. Ours is called Progress Made Real. And it's how we deliver, social impact, and our plan to deliver social impact by 2030. And I'll give you a couple of examples of, some of the big goals that we have, like 50% of our workforce, and 40% of our leadership will identify as women by 2030. And here in the U.S., 25% of our workforce and 15% of our leadership will identify as Black, African American, Hispanic, or Latino. We also have goals around employee resource groups. And I'm sure many of you have employee resource groups. You recognize that, our employee resource groups and those members, they're the most loyal members. They're the most positive. Those are the individuals that are the most engaged, and those are the individuals that we want in our organization. We have a goal to reach 50% of our team members being in an employee resource group. To date, we have 43%, which makes up about 51,000 employees, and that is quite a force to be reckoned with when you have individuals that are really dedicated to supporting one another, and we've seen the support of our employee resource groups supporting each other through the pandemic, and also volunteering and providing pro bono support to nonprofits, actively supporting those organizations that are aligned to our mission. And we want to make sure that we continue to sort of drive that kind of behavior within the organization. But we also, we recognize that, again, we need to do more. We need to bring in, more Black, Hispanic, and female talent. And we need to provide them with the opportunities to rise up into leadership ranks. A few other things that we're doing is, we've just launched an initiative where we're engaging community colleges and those individuals with 2-year degrees, where those individuals can take part in opportunities within a tech company and grow their career. And we've also, and I'm sure like many of you, have been engaged for years with historically Black colleges and universities, minority serving institutions. And it's going further than just recruiting on campus. We're actually providing, these schools with tech curriculum, and also having our team members, be adjunct professors, teaching them the kinds of, skills that they need for jobs for the future. So I think, one of the things that we've recognized is that, individuals within these, categories, they're not always familiar with the opportunities in, data science or sales engineering or, cloud infrastructure, cybersecurity, and we can provide that. And even if, these are individuals that, may not come to work for Dell, they have the opportunity to work for other companies and even companies like yours. And, if they benefit and society benefits, then Dell will certainly benefit from that. So it goes to the systemic part of it all that, we're doing things certainly to ensure that we have a pipeline, but we're also doing things to ensure that, our communities have access to the kinds of education and skills they need. But I think, my question back to you all is, how do we get our peers to understand that this issue is more, can't be siloed. It has to be more than just one meeting. It has to be, more than one team. It has to be talked about everywhere, and it has to be talked about in the right way.
Building on that, the need for increased technology, and as you shared, Danny, STEM education, COVID-19 has really accelerated the world's focus and the ability and need to operate in a digital environment. And in any other year, we might have been sitting down talking, preferably someplace warm. As I said, I live in New York. And really, what we've been doing at Citi is really, we wanted to focus, and as I shared, our Action for Racial Equity initiative has a fourth pillar, which is really focused on how do we strive to be an anti-racist institution? How do we model that in our business practices, products, and services for the rest of the industry? And for us, we rolled up our sleeves when we take a look at algorithm bias and said to ourselves, we can actually build a hub internally to really look across not just how technology plays a role, but what are those things that we could model for the rest of the field. And so our goal is to develop standards and model them for inclusive software design in a way that eliminates racial bias and helps deliver more equitable outcomes when it comes to financial services and in the communities that Citi serves. So this is not an area where people think about, and we know there's increased attention on these issues. But at the same time, until we get everyone in the industry to look at the roles that the code writing and the algorithms play in either providing access or preventing it, I think we're going to continue to struggle. So as we're mindful of products and services at Citi, and that we're also not just enablers or catalysts for investors, but also we have an in-house technology team that has the ability to play this functional role. We see it's an opportunity for us to lead, and we're happy to take on that challenge. And that has huge economic impacts for people of color and women and the places and the communities that we serve.
Yeah, I would like to add to this. I think that's where our focus on community comes in as well. General Mills is a leading founder of the Minnesota Business Coalition for Racial Equity, which now has more than 80 companies as a member. Our goal is to build equitable, inclusive state in and for Black Minnesotans, with the understanding that long-term and systemic change will require everybody to be involved. So we are intentional about working with folks on the ground to make sure that we're listening and partnering to make sure that we're just adding to the work that is already being done. So as we think about what we can do and where the business can really bring some impact, we're focusing our efforts in 4 pillars: workplace, allyship, philanthropy, and policy. And while it's still early days, we're already making some progress, which is good to see. In workplace, we just launched a self-assessment tool that companies can measure the maturity of their workplace inclusion standards and practice, so they know where they are. In allyship, we're launching an allyship toolkit to help establish best practices across the companies to make sure that we're creating an inclusive environment for all Black employees in the state. And as a matter of fact, General Mills has played a big role in creating this toolkit, and we also have made available all the resources that we have in this space in our website. In philanthropy, we launched a digital learning fund, and we're currently working the policies and processes to make sure that we're driving the right outcomes that we want. And lastly, in policy, we have developed recommendations to the Minnesota legislature, and we're working as a coalition to bring the business voice to those issues.
I agree with you, Juliana, yet again. Every company has an opportunity right now. Every company listening to this dialogue has an opportunity to really take a look at the places where they lead in credible, meaningful ways and invest in new ways to support businesses and to support the communities and stakeholders that they care most about. We know there's a huge disparity in financing. This is an area where we can impact growth, particularly in the startup world. And so for us, leaning into that $50 million equity investment means that we know we need to address the reality. And the reality is Black entrepreneurs only receive 1% of the venture capital funding that's available in the market. 1%. Which is nothing in comparison. And so we're not just committed to basic funds, but we also know that it's important for us to lean in as a company and bring additional opportunities to bear. And that's where our businesses come in. We've got a range of capabilities, not just investment capital. We have other expertise, other ways that we can support the growth of entrepreneurs, including supporting their branding activities, supporting their ability to identify additional investors and donors. And so bringing those relationships, that expertise and network to bear is critical for us. So Chris, and I have to say thank you for Cherry Garcia. Thank you for the Netflix version. And thank you for the fact that some of us are lactose intolerant. And I appreciate that you've created an entire line just for that. Now I just have to stop people in my house from eating it before I even get to it. So Chris, now thinking of the long history that Ben & Jerry's has played stepping up publicly on issues of racial justice, and you shared criminal justice reform, I'm interested in hearing more from you on this.
Well, thanks, Jasmine. And I wish I could take credit for Cherry Garcia, but it's none of my work. But I too share your love of our non-dairy line of flavors. So, we do have a long history of sort of engaging in this work. I think there are a couple of things that are important about our approach. I think the first is that we are always partner-led. I'm speaking to you all from Burlington, Vermont, one of the whitest cities in one of the whitest states. But we have been working on these issues of racial justice for, solidly for 6 or more years now, and specifically as it relates to criminal justice reform for the last 3 or 4. We have a strong network of partners and allies that we really take the lead from. We are not the policy experts on how best to deconstruct the broken criminal justice system or rethink policing, but we know who those people are, and those are the people that we center in our work and help define our strategy. we are proponents for policies that address root causes. So while it is important that we take actions within our company and that as individuals, we be change agents, ultimately, we believe that we need policymakers to adopt policies that address the root causes of these ills within our society. Just a super brief example, we've been spending the last 2.5 years supporting an incredibly powerful group of grassroots organizations in the city of St. Louis that have been fighting to close a particularly horrendous prison called the Workhouse. It is a prison that I think would shock most Americans. In a city that's 50% Black, the prison population is almost 100% Black, and almost all of the people that are being held in this prison are being held pre-trial. They've not been convicted of anything. They're being held simply because they have lack access to cash bail. This idea that people are literally spending on average 320 some odd days prior to their hearing or their case being adjudicated goes against everything many of us understand about our criminal justice system, that you could be locked up not having been convicted of something, that you would be imprisoned before being convicted of a crime. And so what we've done is to bring that unique set of tools that I spoke about earlier and put those tools in service of these incredibly powerful and inspirational grassroots campaigners in the city of St. Louis. And we were proud to be a real small part of helping this coalition win a unanimous resolution at the end of last summer, committing the city to closing the Workhouse prison and to ultimately shifting the $14 million a year that's used to fund that prison and shift those expenditures into the kinds of programs and services that truly support public safety. So, I think we brought a unique point of view and set of tools to that debate, and that as a corporation, we have the ability to help mainstream and normalize some of these concepts. And I think that's an important role that we all have as companies and as business leaders, is to help normalize some of these conversations. And, let's be honest, these are not easy conversations to have. Is one of the reasons that these problems have festered for as long as they have. It makes people uncomfortable to talk about issues of race. I think what we are trying to do at Ben & Jerry's, and I know all of you are, is finding ways to feel comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think, we need to continue to push ourselves to embrace that level of discomfort. So,
I agree, Chris. I think that's spot on. I think it's uncomfortable to have those conversations in the workplace, or even have the company make statements on things that they haven't spoken before. But it's absolutely critical that we continue to push conversations on biases, inequities outside and inside the workplace, to make sure that we are addressing those hard topics. And while, we may want to get it right, I know we're going to get it wrong as we go, and we're going to make mistakes along the way. But it's important for us to continue to have those conversations. And while we certainly don't have all the answers, I think by talking to people and by bringing those topics, we'll make progress. And I think that's the intent of our allyship resources. We want to equip our employees to feel more comfortable having those uncomfortable conversations. Our goal is really here, I think all of us, is to share the lessons learned and really, build off each other's successes so we can, as a society, make sustained progress.
Excellent. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think you all have said it, being, more comfortable being uncomfortable. It's kind of a theme, but it's one that, has gathered so many insights for us, for our leaders, to be able to move our organizations forward. So I know I kicked this thing off. We have just a couple of minutes left. This has been an amazing conversation. I think we could all go on for quite some time because I could feel the passion and the energy that we all have personally, and certainly that our companies also have. But, as we think about our audience and the folks listening in, what is it that you think we can do in the next few weeks that's going to make a long-term impact and really sort of drive this issue of racial equality forward. Juliana, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think for me, for any Minnesota business or organization that is listening to us, I just ask you to join our Minnesota Business Coalition for Racial Equity. I think there is a lot of resources there. The power of us working together will be extremely important. I also want to say that our allyship resources, I think, can help everyone. So I would encourage people to just look and check what we have. I think there is a lot of work that we can play. Each of us has a role to play, and if we work together, I think we can make meaningful progress.
And I think it's important for us to take a look at who's at our table. I mean, I really appreciate Chris's comments earlier as well, when he shared that, you know, it was important for Ben & Jerry's to center the stakeholders that they cared most had voice in their investments. I would say the same thing for any institution. Who are you investing in? Who are your partners? And do they have a role in shaping, informing, and co-developing where you want to invest? The other thing I would add is, in addition to being comfortable with being uncomfortable, is hold yourself accountable. Be honest and very public about what you're going to do, and be willing to, as Juliana said, make mistakes. Figure out what it takes to measure and to track where you want to be. And make sure that at the same time, your intention and your frame of mind is clear and focused when it comes to investments. For us, we knew we really had an opportunity to double down in who we were partnering with and bringing them into our business model so that it wasn't a sidecar, it wasn't a siloed approach, but it really was embedded in our portfolio in the way that we believe and our values at Citi.
Thanks, Jasmine, and incredibly important points from everyone. You know, these issues that we're talking about today are currently sitting at the center of civic debate and dialogue in our country. And I think, you know, we sit at an inflection point where there's an opportunity to really make progress at I hope, a pace at which we perhaps haven't seen in a number of years. And as corporations, we are incredibly powerful and influential. We can engage our employees. We can engage our consumers and customers. You know, many of us have government affairs teams that are walking the halls of power every day. And so thinking about how can we use this sort of position of privilege and power that we have to be advocates for change and to normalize the conversation that we need to have around this. We were fortunate to host Congressman John Lewis about a year before his death at our corporate headquarters, and it was truthfully one of the highlights of my life. And so in closing words, perhaps I will kind of take his, that I would encourage us all to think about how we can get into a little bit of good trouble. Thank you.
Those are certainly powerful, powerful words from John Lewis. You know, I think, you know, when I think about it, you know, my Chief Diversity Inclusion Officer, Brian Reeves, said it best for me. He says the best way to deal with systemic inequity is through systemic empathy and systemic education. And that's why we're building it into everything that we do. Ensuring that we're, you know, mitigating bias throughout the entire talent continuum, and whether that's, you know, the acquisition or the development or the promotion, the reward, the engagement, everywhere through we have to look and analyze and dig deep to ensure that, you know, bias gets mitigated and eliminated through that process to give individuals opportunity. I think Emily is about to jump back on screen to cut us off. So I'll just say, you know, to all of you, you know, Juliana and Chris and Jasmine, you know, thank you for such an amazing conversation. You know, I think it's an important dialogue that, you know, we need to continue to have. And certainly all of those that, you know, will listen into this session, it's important for them to engage as well. We need everybody in this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you to our speakers for such a thoughtful discussion. I think it's clear that no matter where you fit into your company, what department you're in, from government affairs to product development, marketing, HR, there's an opportunity for you to actively shape your company's response to racial justice. And we know that this is not the end of the discussion, and Ceres is deeply committed to providing outlets for you all to tap in to make sure you're driving progress towards racial justice. And as you can see on this slide on the screen, we've highlighted multiple opportunities for private sector actors to get involved and join us and our partners to really make impact together. So we hope you can join us, and thanks again for tuning in.